April 16th, and it is observed to raise awareness about the need to better care for boys and to protect them from sexual violence. It is a day that not only calls for to know about this whole event, but also to it calls for change and action and to safeguard the rights and well-being of boys worldwide. Now, the journey of Blue Umbrella started when a research was done on caring for boys, and it was conducted from 2018 to 2021 across 7 countries. And many of us might not be aware, but 1 out of 13 boys globally experience sexual abuse. Now, Blue Umbrella Day serves as a platform to raise awareness about this critical problem and advocate for the safety and well being for boys. This day doesn't actually call us together for acknowledge the problem, but also to create change. And we can create change by bringing awareness to sexual violence against boys. We can break down the stigmas, we can encourage open conversations, and we can empower communities to better support our young men. Now, why are we doing this webinar, right? It must be a question that you are thinking right now. So as our volunteers, as students, and as working professional, you are the future leaders and current change makers. You have the power to create a more compassionate and responsible world. And by attending this webinar, you will gain valuable knowledge about protecting boys from sexual violence. This knowledge can empower you to speak up, challenge harmful stereotypes, and become advocates for safer future for all. So get ready for this engaging discussion. So before we go further, I would really like to introduce our esteemed speaker. Uh, Savarni Purkayastha is an Ashoka Fellow and holds an MBA from Jadavpur University, where he also graduated in economics. He has been working with boys and young men on gender equity and masculinities since 1997 through Praajak, of which he is founder director. His work has been primarily focused on children, especially child safeguarding, issues of children in difficult circumstances, including itinerant children in contact with railways and children in conflict with law. He currently works with young people in 12 districts to set up youth collectives that campaign for gender equity and intervene during situations of gender bias stigma, discrimination and violence, including domestic violence, street sexual harassment, child marriage, child trafficking, and child sexual abuse. He has been advocating for restructuring of the custodial approach to the rights of children, adolescents, and other young people, and has been highlighting how recognizing the agency of children and their choice and consent can eliminate institutional stigma, discrimination, and violence against them. He specifically works to develop effective responses through community based child safeguarding systems and champion kinship and foster care for children, diversion of children in conflict with law, and using restorative justice as a conflict resolution strategy at the community level. Sir, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for taking out your valuable time. And I'm sure our volunteers are eager to hear from you. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rubina. That was quite a big introduction. Um, First of all, thank you to CRY. Uh, CRY has had a very, very long personal and professional relationship with me, and it actually gives me great pleasure that CRY has decided to organize this. It's sort of, let me say, a validation from CRY, who is an esteemed partner for the work that I have done for a long time. So I am really overwhelmed with this, this arrangement, this event that has been there. Also, welcome to all of you who are here, and I hope to make this meaningful for you. And I have a small presentation which I would like to follow. And though, of course, I will speak also sometimes beyond what is there on that slide. So just requesting Saptarshi if it's possible for you to share this while I make those some introductory remarks.
Yeah. Is it visible
Uh,
on my screen?
it's visible to me. Yeah. I hope it's visible to the others also. Yeah. Okay. So 16th April every year, we celebrate what is called Blue Umbrella Day. Um, as you see that in most of the posters that is there, you find a blue umbrella, and under which there is a young boy. Now, let me at the outset say that, the umbrella means sort of a protection, and blue is the stereotypical color for boys. So, but as gender activists, we have been continuously saying, that, color codes should not be gendered. But for this campaign, we were advised when we were designing the name and the logo that, since we have to sort of reach to people in general who might still be, coding things in a very gendered fashion, maybe we should still use the color blue so that we can reach out to most people to tell them both, I think, consciously and unconsciously that, we are talking about boys. So, Blue Umbrella Day is a day when we want to raise awareness about sexual violence that affects boys and young men, and also try to look at ways in which we can, counter that. In ways we can actually say that there will be one day in our society and in our communities that sexual violence against boys will be zero, like sexual violence against all children will be zero, and we don't want to leave the boys out of it. So if we go to the next slide, uh, just our focus of Blue Umbrella Day. But before I talk about the focus, Blue Umbrella Day is now a big global movement. This was basically spearheaded by Family for Every Child. Family for Every Child, for all of you, is a global alliance of organizations who work at the grassroots, mostly in the global south. That means in Asia, Africa, and in Latin America, mostly. And all these organizations came together, and many of our organizations, including Praajak, had a long experience of working with street children, had a long experience of working inside institutions, childcare institutions with boys. And sexual violence perpetrated on boys was not something that was, one off in the work that we have done all these years. It was quite a strong presence. And we were sort of sad actually that, in spite of all this evidence, somewhere somehow we have not been able to influence our policymakers, we have not been able to influence other NGOs, we have not been able to influence a lot of donors to actually look at this issue as something very important. So in 2021, Family for Every Child and other members got together, and we published a series of studies called Caring for Boys, where one of the major recommendations was that we need to have a global campaign on this, and nothing short of a global campaign will actually influence policymakers internationally, regionally, or even nationally. And that's how the Blue Umbrella Day campaign was born on the 16th of April. Just for your information, over the years, we actually have a fortnight from the 16th of April to the 30th of April, where we dedicate this to different, events. And this event, for example, happening today on the 19th, is one such of the many events that are happening the world over around this issue during this fortnight. So our focus, as you can see, is you've already seen this. So it's about raising awareness. There is such deep disbelief among a lot of people about sexual violence against boys that sometimes we have to hit our heads against a wall of disbelief to make people understand, no, that sexual violence, sexual abuse of boys is there. You don't see it, you don't understand it, or there is something inside you. Somewhere our gendered ideas about men being strong and women being always the victims help us to give us a sort of some glasses that we wear, where we can only see that, okay, there are girls who are victims. There are girls who are survivors, but we don't really look at boys. But the evidence is there in front of us, and I will talk about it as we go. So there is need of a lot of raising of awareness. Let me tell you a small personal anecdote where not a few many months ago, I had a very senior government official telling me on the side, are you sure you want to go about this campaign? Are you sure we are not imposing Western uh, you know, issues on to India? Do you really believe that such a thing happens in India? So, when it comes from a senior government official who is responsible for making policy and to whose opinions a lot of people look up to it was very alarming for me to actually hear that at one level. So raising awareness, of course, on Blue Umbrella Day, and we have been doing this for the last 3 years. uh, Creating demand for appropriate services. Now, there are services when if you have a child who is has been sexually abused, there are services. There are medical services, there are counseling services, there are legal aid services, there is psychosocial support services, there are services for to support the family of the child. Yes, there are services, but uh, for boys, there are some specific services that are required for the very simple reason that there is so much of disbelief about what's happening with boys. Because boys themselves find it very hard to come out with an incident, because the way that we have grown up, boys have grown up, sort of internalizing masculine values, where men are all supposed to be strong, men are supposed to fight it out. And if there is a man who has been abused, then possibly there is something deeply problematic with his own gender role and identity that has led to that. So there is this internalized fear of being labeled as effeminate. There is this internalized fear of having being labeled as not a man enough. And that is was one of the reasons why a lot of boys don't come up with this. Even if you do come up with this to your family and peers, the tendency would be that, okay, that's, people do this in fun, things happen like this, boys do this to other boys, it's just a boy thing. I mean, why are you making such a big issue out of it? I mean, why are you so sensitive? You will not be able to succeed in your career if you're this sensitive. So please, deal with it. So there is a sort of a denial of what is happening, and a deliberate effort sometimes to hush it up. Not because somebody wants to protect the perpetrator, but largely because people don't think that is, very important. And of course, we would like to engage the government and policymakers. We would like to engage civil society organizations. We would like to engage communities to understand about this, because one of the major challenges on this, as you might already have been able to understand, is that there are very few reports that are coming up. There are very few formal or informal disclosures. So by formal disclosures, I mean direct disclosure to government systems. So the police, it could be child welfare committees, it could be any other government body, it could be the child line. And by informal disclosure, I mean disclosure to, say, friends, disclosure to peers, disclosure to counselors, disclosure to teachers, etc. So none of that is happening. So if you can get to the next slide. Uh, so the ask, what is the ask for this? So one is that, we want people to understand that sexual violence affects boys too. And of course, there is more that we can do about this, and both online and offline. It's not just in India, but also in many other countries, especially in the global south. Um, Boys have more access to mobiles and data than girls have comparatively. So the internet becomes a site where there is a lot of risk to boys also, as with girls. But because there are more boys who are on the net, that's another big site where where a lot of abuse potentially happens. And there are, as I said, there is a need for special support and services. We need to know how to talk to boys when such a thing has happened. because we need to assure them that it is not about their identities, it is not about, it's not their fault. So it will be very similar to, the protocols that we have when we deal with girls, but also it's a little different when we are actually also, there are issues about gender identity, sexual identity, which also has to be tackled with boys, because again, as statistics shows that, most of the perpetrators, the largest number of about 90% up, and I'm being conservative about this, uh, are men. So it's other males who are mostly committing sexual violence against boys. So this is the ask for Blue Umbrella Day. So we want more people to believe that yes, this is happening to boys. We want more people to realize that boys need support and that we need to extend that support. And we want more and more, governments to engage with this. We want civil society organizations to engage with this. Next slide, please. Uh, the three key messages. So as I said, sexual violence affects boys too. Rubina has also mentioned the a WHO study, which says that globally, 1 in 13 boys experience sexual abuse, and many more are actually exposed to inappropriate sexual materials. And by this, I mean exposed to pornography. All of you would know that, the male boy masculine cultures, especially in adolescence, put a lot of premium on access to pornography, on a lot of in building their identity as men. So if you are a boy, if you're a man, then you will be sort of, accessing and talking more about pornography, discussing more about pornography, and almost that becomes like a parallel culture. So the more you're into pornography, the more like, manly your interests are, and that's what your peers keep telling you. So this, as I said, was one of the key messages. And this year, the campaign will actually be taken about by 25 in 25 countries. And large global alliances, say, for example, like ECPAT, are also taking up Blue Umbrella Day. And we believe that over the next few years, this is going to be quite a big thing internationally, as it should be. And as Praajak, as being a member, among another member, we are two members from India in this alliance, we are trying to actually popularize this in India too, so that issues about boys are addressed here. I just want to say something that unlike globally, where about 80% countries do not legally recognize that there can be sexual violence against boys, in India, we have the POCSO Act, which is an act which protects children from sexual offenses. And that's a gender neutral act. So whether you are a girl, a boy, or somebody who is beyond the gender binaries, all children are protected from the act. It's a very, very tough act in many ways. So while in India, we have an advantage globally in the sense that we already have a law which is gender neutral. And also we have statistics from the government. And I want to tell you this, the statistics from the government of India, which was published in 2007 in by now quite a famous study called a study on child abuse, which said that, and it happened around with a huge amount of children were interviewed, and it happened across 13 states in 2007, and it's been quite a long time. And this report mentioned that of all the children who admitted to sexual abuse, whether mild or severe, 52%, almost 53% were boys. In fact, that was such a stunning statistic that the government, when it enacted POCSO, the Child Sexual Abuse Act, which protects children against child sexual abuse, the government made it gender neutral. But the problem here, again, is gender neutral act. We have the government which willy-nilly acknowledges that there is sexual violence against boys and they need to be protected. But there is there is so little disclosure, so few reports because of gender roles, gender expectations, gender stereotypes, which I guess you all understand. that there is very little reporting. And of course, so there is, like, for anybody, whether it's in the government or the non-government sector, if there are very few cases which are coming up, there is a tendency that we would not like to put in more time, more other resources into preventing that. So that's sad. That's one of the issues why we want to focus on sexual violence against boys in India. So I go to the next slide, and that is message two. So basically trying to say that that there is a lot more we can do to prevent and protect boys from sexual violence. Just having that law is not enough. Uh, we need to do more things. Boys need more access to support services. The support services have to be friendly. I mean, even if a boy wants to go into a counselor's room or a teacher's room with this, have we created an atmosphere where the boy can freely come and tell me this without being judged? So this is exactly what we are trying to say, that are we building this environment? Are we creating that, that encouragement in other boys by telling them, say, see, we realize that boys face sexual violence. We don't look down on boys that face sexual violence. We don't judge them. We don't think that, there are huge issues with those boys. Please feel free, come and talk to me, and I am there, and I will try to stand by you. So, a lot of support services need that sort of understanding, and a lot of, let me say, proactive environment building, and to build an enabling environment for a lot of boys to come. The other thing that we've often find, and this is a lot of boys whom we have interviewed and we've worked with, always fear, is that there is always a chance that if, suppose I was a boy and I go up to an elder person or even to a formal disclosure sort of thing, and I say that, something like this has happened to me, there is a chance that I will be criminalized. There is a chance that, the gendered way in which we read something will immediately stereotype a boy as somebody who can only perpetrate, and we will always think that this boy is actually the perpetrator. This is a very shaitan boy. This is this is how boys are, and he's now making up stories. So this innate fear of criminalization, and it's not that it's not true, it has been happening in many countries, especially countries where boys, the sexual violence of boys is not recognized as a crime. This is happening all the while. And even in India, where we have recognized this as a crime, but in communities where people don't know about it, this is something really, really challenging. And one of the things is that we can do more if we have enough data. We need more data about sexual violence against boys, and I will speak to it at the end of this. But I would like to go to the next slide, which is about the key message three that we have, that boys affected by sexual violence. It's a truism now. I mean, and it's also something, it's implied by all that I'm saying, that they need better support services to help them recover. And as adults, we need to do more. We need to reassure boys. We need to build that enabling environment as parents, as caregivers, as anybody who has had anything to do with boys. Let me also, if there are boys who are listening to me, and if there are other men who are listening to me, many of them will agree that one of the sites of a lot of sexual violence actually happens on the sports ground. And so coaches need to know, sports master, physical education teachers need to be really, really keyed into this entire thing. And let me tell you something here, is that, over the last 3 years, when we have, done this campaign, and there have been many men, adult men, who have lived experience of sexual violence, have come across, have spoken to us, many have spoken to me in particular, and they have told me something, is that, you see, bullying is such a big part of male culture in schools, in communities, and even for young adults in colleges. I think a lot of you may have still remember an incident where an under 18 student in Jadavpur University fell from the veranda of the hotel, or we don't know what really happened, but his body was found and he died. And the circumstances around it proved that he was ragged and there was a lot of sexual violence on him. So there is I mean, for a lot of men who have lived through this have come across and told us that, we need to really also attack bullying and ragging while we are talking about sexual violence, because there's a thin line between bullying and ragging. While somebody is bullying a young boy, one never knows that that bullying will lead to groping, that bullying will lead to a very aggressive touching of genitals. So that's something which is very important. And of course, as I have been saying, and you have also realized, is this being a man, trying to be a man, actually discourages a lot of boys to speak out. And in fact, a lot of studies have shown that the older you get, it's easier for men to talk about. It's still hard, but it's still comparatively easier than when you're under 18. So next slide, please. So this is the major focus of Blue Umbrella Day, for the global campaign, for the Indian campaign on sexual violence against boys, that we really need better data around violence affecting boys. So I just want to highlight that, the WHO data, which says 1 out of 13 boys get sexually abused. We are not so sure, because it's not that, there has been a global study, there has been like where the entire universe of boys have been mapped. We know we don't need to do that, but there has also not been very representative sample-based studies across the world. So this is just like an estimate. And for many of us, the more we deal with, young boys who feel unsafe in different situations, the more we come across adult men with lived experience of sexual violence, we realize that, there is much more data around that, are around there in in our communities, which we have no access to. And this lack of data is actually preventing us not only from strongly highlighting the issue, but also designing the sort of friendly support services that are required in this sort of case. So as part of this global movement, and as part of Prajak's own campaign, uh, Praajak has actually, resolved this Blue Umbrella Day, that we would like to reach out to more and more adult men who have lived experience of sexual violence. We would request them that if they feel comfortable and they would like to speak to us, we would like to capture their stories. We would like to capture their experiences, and those experiences, with their consent, with their participation, active participation in the entire process, we would like to do a qualitative study around it, to actually identify, when these things happen, where these things happen. For example, what do we tell a teacher to look out for? Which are the situations that a teacher should look out for? What would be the otherwise telltale signs? When a child comes with a particular problem, how can a teacher very safely also explore whether this particular problem somehow is related to an experience of sexual violence or not? So we need really much more better data around the issue. And one of the reasons why, I'm not losing a single chance of talking to people as much as possible, especially talking to men, is that, that this message needs to travel as far as possible. uh, and I want to assure a lot of men who might have been living with this history of sexual violence, who had experienced that please come forward, talk to us. This is an entirely confidential exercise. Let us together, counter this. Let us together, you know, create this place where there will be no more sexual violence against any child, whether it's a girl or a boy. And the next slide is just about April being the month of Blue Umbrella Day. And one of my fervent appeals will be to all men and all women out there that, we really need to talk about this. And while we don't want to limit this talk only to April, uh, for Praajak, for a lot of us in this movement, we are actually doing this year round. So we have a lot of our programs lined up. And let me tell you that for Praajak, this is not just an NGO CSO project-based thing. It's something that, which we are doing, which is beyond projects, programs, and other things, because we feel this is very important to do this. And so Praajak has also created a steering committee which has a very strong representation of adult men who have faced sexual violence. And they are the ones who are actually giving us ideas. They are the ones who are actually telling us that what should be the best way to take those steps forward, because we want to break this into a mass sort of a movement, not something just related to, a non-government organization or what the government wants to do. So thank you so much, all of you, for this patient hearing. And if there are people who want to interact, I'll be happy to interact with them.
Thank you so much, Deep, for the wonderful session. So now floor is open. I will request our volunteers to, you can write in the chat box or you can, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can unmute and
Okay, good evening, sir. Uh, this was a wonderful session. I'm really thankful to be here. I have a question. Rape laws in India, they don't really consider uh, they only extend the scope of someone being raped to someone who identifies as a woman. So, sir, how do you think the policy should proceed in the new criminal laws to extend the scope towards men as well?
I think we just need to recognize that men can be raped, and not just limit it to just, under 18, but also above 18. I'll tell you a small anecdote. And that was quite a happy and a sad day for me. All of you have heard about Nirbhaya, and this huge movement that happened in India against sexual assault. It made us all proud to be part of that movement. And as a result of that, Parliament sat late into the night, the criminal amendment. And this was basically on the basis of some suggestions given by both late Justices Verma and Justice Leela Sheth and others. They, among other things, had mentioned two more things which the government did not at that time accept. They don't have not accepted as yet. One was marital rape, to actually include marital rape into this Criminal Amendment Act, Criminal Law Amendment Act. The other was male rape. Actually, the report said that when this was mentioned in Parliament, the joint session of Parliament, which has done overwhelming 90% representation of men, laughed this out. They thought that, this men can never be raped. This is a laughable thing to say, and etc. So I'm not sure how far we still have to go. But I absolutely agree with you that this will have to be, and this movement also is a logical, outgrowth of the movement around sexual violence against boys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
next. I think quite a few hands. Riti, Deeksha, Ausi, Chandrika, anyone.
So, I think I
Yes,
can go first.
I,
Oh, please go ahead. Go ahead.
no, no, Dhriti, you go ahead. Yeah, after that,
Okay. Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's a very crucial topic, and not just for boys and men, but it also extends as when we look from a gender lens, it also extends to, I think, the similar issue with all genders, all populations. I think my question is around that when we are navigating this, I think you mentioned awareness with teachers, sport teachers, parents, etc. So, are there any resources you could direct us to have these conversations? And second of all, for the campaign that you shared about generating some more narratives around lived experience, if we could get access to maybe a brief or a contact person, we could also circulate it in our networks.
There are, if you go to the Blue Umbrella Day or www.blueumbrelladay.org, that has a wealth of, open resources around sexual violence against boys. You will also come across this research called Caring for Boys out there. You can also search for Caring for Boys. And I will send some of the links to Shaptoshi, so he can, send them over to you. And
Yeah, yeah.
there are very few resources, very unfortunately, but there are enough resources for you to start something on. Of course, there are also, some modules that we use which are not on the net, but these are also accessible if you ask us. But some of those modules are more about how you conduct sessions with boys safely. And also, it also needs to prepare oneself that in case there is somebody who is coming across to you and saying, and is breaking down because something has really been, the person has been triggered, how do you go about it? So those are a little risky, so we have not put it down on the net as such, because it will need a sort of hand holding to implement that. But the others, posters, etc., are there. If you also go to our Prajak's Instagram account for the last 2-3 years, we've got a lot of posters and other things there also.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, next.
Yes. Hi. Good evening. Thank you so much for that session. It was quite insightful, and I'm sorry I can't turn on my camera right now. But my question is focused around a specific kind of case, and though right now the time doesn't allow for an in-depth discussion of it, but it's based on a personal experience of someone who told me that when he was sexually abused during his childhood. So because, and this also happens in a lot of narratives, we hear that they were told that it's a game, especially when you are young. They were told that you're playing a game, and then you come back, and then that male child plays the games with others, maybe their friends or their cousins. So in this kind of a situation where the person is a victim but has also become a perpetrator in his childhood, um how do you go about intervening, or how do you really see the entire situation, because there's more victims on the other end now? Just yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. That's often a worrisome, phenomenon and situation that we have to encounter. The answer to all, somebody who's under 18 and exhibits harmful sexual behavior, the answer to that person and the person who is perpetrated on, somebody who's a victim, is healing and understanding. And while anything really that is serious and which a victim wants to take it up at a level of the law, that is the person's right. There is an issue also called, mandatory reporting within the law, which says that, if any adult gets to know about any sort of sexual abuse that is happening, irrespective of whether this is a boy, girl, or whoever, will have to report it. But sometimes this becomes a very tough decision, because you're reporting against maybe a very, very close family member. You're reporting against somebody whom you otherwise love and have a lot an affectionate relationship with, etc. And so it becomes really difficult. So but there is a necessity for healing. There is a necessity that all boys, go through understanding gender, patriarchy, sexuality, issues around that, because only then it becomes very clear to boys as to what is happening. Because while this is a game, is something which is also something which, adult abusers also tell young girls. What happens specifically with boys is that this is not just a game. It's not just masti that is happening. It's like an initiation into manhood. If you're actually feeling pain, that's a shame, because you have to grow up to be a man. You have to so many responsibilities that you have to take to deal with that pain. It's good that the pain is happening to you. You have to deal with that sort of pain. It's like a normal thing. Uh, so often a lot of things like this happen in public. When groping boys genitals by older boys or other older men often happens in public in our culture, and it's considered to be something very normal, and it's a way of, as you said, way of showing affection. I mean, for the child whose affection is being showed to that person might not like it, but everybody else is like, okay, this is affection. So if we have so many cases of children who are going to their mothers, and the mothers said that, but why are you making such a big issue out of this? This nana or this dada or this chacha or mama loves you. This is just a playing. This is just a little bit of things. It happens all the time. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? So that is there. So we need to talk to parents and we need to voice themselves, because talking to a lot of parents who are busy, there's going to be a long thing to do. But I think because we believe in the agency of children, that children do have agency, they have independent ways of thought, they have the capacity to say no or to deal with situations, many situations, without on their own. So we need to really talk to boys about these issues, about both facing sexual violence and also perpetrating it. Thank you.
Next,
Thank you so much.
Chandrika.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Chandrika, you may.
Uh, Hi, sir. It was really an insightful session. My question revolves around the fact that we all know what happened with the same sex judgment that came out. So, whenever such questions, which are more controversial, which are not accepted by majority of the Indian society, these things, but one thing that I would say that our Indian judiciary is much more acknowledged, much more prone towards acknowledging these situations. But the one question that they raise is that we can't do anything, our hands are tied, because it's an avenue or area where the legislature should create laws. And that's when we can call a law void, or just say this law is not pertaining to the societal needs. But the judiciary always acknowledges, and that's how they comes up with guidelines and anything. But my it's not a question, it's a concern that I want to convey, is that there are countries where judiciary is not as functioning as Indian judiciary is. So how far will the Indian legislature be awakened that we are waiting another Nirbhaya case to happen? Then only the legislature will be forced to take action. So how fast can we increase the process of forcing them? Maybe not forcing, but does bringing these issues in front of them and saying that, okay, it's not like you will think about it later on, but it's an emergency that you should come up with some laws. Even POXO do recognize penetrative sexual offenses, but it's just concerning about children. But when it comes to the whole avenue of men and male concern, there really lacks any legislature which pertains to this area. So this was my
Okay. A very valid concern. And the whole thing is that, of course, sometimes we have to force our legislators to take action. And though it might be a little unfashionable to say that, I personally found legislators, political leaders who stand for elections, etc., a little more receptive to what we have to say, rather than bureaucrats, because somewhere there is some sort of accountability. A lot of people. The problem is not that they don't realize it, but when a law has to be made, or something, some government steps has to be taken, it has to be taken on the basis of evidence. And this evidence on sexual violence against boys and men is not critical enough to actually force legislation to happen. There, if you look at National Crime Records Bureau data, not even 1% of the cases under POXO are about boys. There are states where there are no cases against boys. So without that evidence, so that is why when I ended my presentation, I put such a strong emphasis on generating evidence. And the best way to generate evidence so far now safely is to have adult men with lived experience to come out and talk in huge numbers, so that this evidence can be presented to the government for legislation. Even if the government cites whatever reasons that they will not be able to pass legislation, we can take the evidence to the courts. Though personally, I think, constitutionally speaking, the courts should not keep directing the government or the legislative so much. It actually affects the independence of both form of thing. But the court can at least point out that something must happen. They can actually recommend to the legislator that this is something that has come to me and we think we should do something. So this is something which can move either wise, both with the judiciary and the legislature. But we need evidence, and that we all have to act to see that that evidence is collected.
Thank you, Deep. So next, Priya, Nilanjana.
Can I speak? Am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, there's a lot of internet issues around me. Sorry for the evening. And thank you so much for briefing everything out very simply. So I'm a psychology student, and today's webinar was very enlightening for me. So I would want to, if I in the future want to base a research survey on this topic that we have addressed today. So what kind of simplified questions can I frame in my survey so that I can reach out to the males and they will not be very hesitant to talk about it. Like I want simplified if because you're an expert here, you would be able to tell me like because as psychology students we do have some barriers. We cannot frame questions that are very critical for the audience to understand, or we cannot put numbers and all of that. So without numbers and very simple questions that will not also make the person feel very hesitant to answer. If you could quote a few questions for me, that would be very helpful.
Well, questions will actually depend on what the objective of the study is and what you want to do with the data. So I don't know what to really answer to this.
So
but if you're
I would like to, sorry, just so if I am, for example, if I'm not keeping an age group, but I want to know the, what kind of situations they go through, and if they go through, what is their healing journey, like if they heal properly, if they have been able to heal themselves, or they have any resources to reach out to, or anybody to talk to, or what could they also, if they have healed, if what could be the measures if they want to pass it on to somebody else who is not being able to heal themselves, or something around that. So if any few questions you could, like right now obviously I cannot uh, put down an entire survey based on that, but just a few suggestions if I in the future if I want to do something about this.
The questions which you're mentioning are actually too heavy and they're too risky to ask people. I think I suggest that questions at that level are not asked randomly to people. It might not help you with data gathering at all because there might be a lot of resistances. But simple questions like do you believe that boys also face sexual violence? If you don't believe, why do you think you don't believe? um, and then you can ask questions like, okay, do you think people go through bullying, boys go through bullying? Why do boys go through bullying? What sort of boys go through bullying? Things like that. That gives you a basic idea. In the sort of questionnaire that you're saying, that gives you a basic idea about what perceptions of individuals are. But it might be too risky to ask direct questions around that. It needs a lot of trust building. A lot of people might not be willing to say if there is no there are no assurance of confidence, and if they don't know what you will do with that data. So I think very general questions around perceptions and beliefs should be fine.
Okay, thank you, Deep. Thank you, Shreya. So Nilanjana, can you go ahead and ask?
Yeah. Hi, Deep. This is Nilanjana from the media team in CRY. Hope you are good.
I'm good. Hi.
Yeah, thank you for this very insightful session. Now, I have a question that is, of course, the biggest problem, basis my understanding in combating this menace, is, of course, the lack of awareness among various stakeholders about this till now. Obviously, awareness is increasing. Now, I would like to ask you here, since you are working with so many young boys and interacting with them, trying to get them open up to you and your team, is there any perceptible change in mindset among the boys about the fact that this, sexual violence against boys of their age is a reality and they should understand and be alert and report it? So are boys actually becoming more receptive to this very harsh reality that exists, but not many boys, not many people in the society know about it. So because a change in mindset among the young adults is, I think, the first step to sort of a broader change in the other strata of society.
Right. I don't know. Again, I will not be able to talk about like whether it's happening to all boys, but wherever my experience is that boys, we or anybody else, any other NGO or government body have talked to groups of boys and have taken them through, a particular process where there is a discussion around that. I think boys are very responsive to the fact,
Okay.
and they actually come up and say that, these things happen. And last year, actually, before we celebrated Blue Umbrella Day, we did a survey in a few districts only and in a few schools and with other NGOs who work with boys, and where we actually took them through a workbook exercise about understanding about sexual abuse and etc. And we said that in case you want to share certain things with us in the sense that about yourselves, that you need some help or support or whatever, you can. And if you want to participate in a small poll, we had a small secret ballot there, a system where if you think something.
uh I think Deep has gone mute.
Yeah, you are.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know from when I went mute, but
About
I
that
was saying
poll,
that,
about that poll,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, poll. So, and in that poll, though that was just a very small section, not many children, but 38% of, sorry, 28% of the boys who did those sessions actually came out and said that these things happen, these things have happened with me. Fortunately, a lot of things they have reported were mild, so it was not such huge levels of support. But I believe that there have been other people who have not reported.
Right.
So when we are talking to young boys are coming out and saying, the big surprise is that for them, that this is the what they were going through is actually sexual abuse and that there's a law against it. I think the biggest surprise is that. And my experience is that the moment they realize that, okay, there's a law against it and the government recognizes this, is when it emboldens them to speak up. So this is
Right.
one thing that I've noticed, that the existence of a law actually emboldens a lot of children to speak up and say, okay, this has happened to me. And so this is not a normal, musty, fun behavior. This is abuse. So
Right.
it is happening if you're talking to them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That,
So, Subhodeep, please unmute yourself. Hello, Subhodeep, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Good
Okay.
evening, all.
Yeah.
Sir, I belongs to. There are many problem under the children because poor. There are people living poor people, and they don't goes to school, and there are this is the main problem, and there are children like after 18 they goes to married when the they are not educated at like, and this is the problem in big and there are financial problem, a big problem for villages, and at this time uh, all the children they goes to the school. They don't goes to the school for school fees like a government school, then don't go for school fees. It is the main reason for the villages.
You can, Subhodeep, you can write your question in the chat. It is like your
yeah,
network
what
is not
I
that
got
great.
was a network was a problem. What I
Mhm.
got was, I think Shubhati was mentioning a lot of children who are out of school. But
Mhm.
I did not get the point about fees, because actually till about maybe he's talking about beyond class 8, because till
Mhm.
class 8 education is free, almost free, and this is very little amount. Sometimes they do take amounts for development fees and etc. That is there, but even that can be waived if the parents approach the the institution and saying that it's very difficult for them to pay fees. So till class 8, there should not be a fee related problem. Of course, and there's midday meal also in school, so it actually subsidizes the family income a little bit. But yes, if he's talking about those who are beyond 14, that is beyond class 8, then that becomes certainly a problem, because that's when you need financial resources. But I think
Thank you.
a lot of networks are talking about extending free and compulsory education till class 12. So let's see what happens.
Thank you, Diksha and Priti. And post that, we have few questions I think in the chat, then we close.
Yeah, I'm Diksha. I asked my question. I'll just put down my hand. Thank you.
Okay. 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 Priti, your hand is
Yes.
also raised.
Yes, I just have one question. Sorry. This is a little bit more of a niche question because I also run a mental health helpline. I put the number in the chat box, so if anyone needs to refer any individuals who are facing distress, you can use that. But my question was around the law about reporting, especially underage when we're talking about POXO, and the issue that comes up that a lot of the perpetrators are people at home. So, what are your thoughts about navigating that? Because I think that becomes an ethical issue that a lot of times when we're trying to report it, it ends up causing more harm than help. So, any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, this is something which a lot of service providers, including NGOs and other, especially mental health service providers, are actually trying to negotiate. That's a big critique of POXO is around mandatory reporting. I will direct you to, if you can go to the NIMHANS website, and you have sort of guidelines for mental health professionals around mandatory reporting. It recognizes that you cannot immediately report, but given that the fact that there is a law around mandatory reporting, it actually tells you the steps of how you take your client, one step by other, and the family to a position where they might want to report. But I will still say that you will still be left dissatisfied, because we are still dissatisfied with those sort of things. So until there is an entire review of mandatory reporting, these are the only resources that we can, go by. Otherwise, there is already a critique of it, and a lot of us who work on this issue are actually saying that something that works in Sweden might not work in India. So we need to really relook at who does the reporting, how mandatory reporting happens, and etc. But the law is the law, and I think government people like state commissions for child protection and etc. actually understand it. But changing the law in these issues also takes a lot of time. In India, whenever something very gruesome rape happens, the first general response of the population is hang the person. I mean, without really going into this sort of a thing. So you will realize that any of us who are trying to bring this issue to public and say, okay, let's review mandatory reporting, will be like, oh, so you're part of the perpetrator, you don't want to be want to report. So so this is a little difficult actually. But we are at it, and we will need actually help of mental health professionals like you, because a lot of disclosure happens with you, and you get into risk. But you need to come up and we have to have this coalition and try to talk more about it and see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Priti.
That's
Thank you.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So one question is from Moitri. I want to know where the affected man can raise their voice, or if he seeks any help, where can he contact? Is there any portal for asking help or any kind of helpline?
For under 18, of course, there are lots of places the person can go. There is Childline. The person can talk to 1098. The person can go directly to the state commission. If you go to the West Bengal, I'm talking about West Bengal only. West Bengal State Commission's, for children's website, you have a WhatsApp number there where you can actually anonymously say something and they'll get back to you. You can come to organizations like CRY and Praajak also if somebody wants to come. This is for under 18 people. For those who are over 18 and want support, well, they can come to Praajak, and we can always direct them to, mental health organizations, other organizations. Some we will be able to deal with, some we will have to refer to on the basis of the criticality of the case.
Thank you, Deep. So, we can take one more question if it is there, or else already 7:05. We have overshot the time by 5 minutes. So, if anyone wishes to ask any any question, please feel free to ask. We have already recorded the meeting, so we can share with you as and when you want. And also, Deep will be sending us all the materials so that you can also at your own level do awareness. And I would like to, from CRY, I would like to thank Deep for agreeing to do the session in a very small time frame, and also uh, taking the session in such a manner. The subject matter is very heavy, but you are like one of the best speaker, as I know. How can you, like, you have some of the very hardest topic in a very easiest manner so that it is easy for us to understand, but the topic is very very heavy, and very few people nowadays they want to, even in 2024 people don't admit. And as you have rightly said, as boys grow from boys to older age, so there are chance people then speak up. So under 18, the speaking up is or saying about abuse has happened with me. It is very very less, and we'd like to thank Deep and also Praajak. So Praajak is being a long-standing partner of CRY for I think over a decade. Deep, I don't know, matlab, over
Over 2 decades.
over 2 decades.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Praajak has been in hand with Try, and Try also worked hand in hand in Praajak. So I'd like to thank Deep, Praajak, and also our entire volunteers, those who have joined like taken time to join and listen. And this is a very important topic, and would like to close the webinar. And Deep will be sharing with us all the relevant documents. So at your own level, you can read and also spread the message to the wider audience. So thank you, everyone. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for having me, and I will certainly share the materials as soon as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Ma'am, we are leave.